to experiment with ideas, and sometimes I'll take a position, and I was partly doing that in the last video. I'll start to take a position almost in the fringes of what I really believe. Like, I don't really believe it, but I want to test it. Or I might take something for granted and say, okay, if that's true, then what else would it mean?
Healthy.
Now, the thing is, you could do that on video, and it might be like a passing moment, like a thought experiment, but it can be taken out of context.
Yep.
You know, there's some interesting footage about, I think it's like Sam Harris or one of these kind of guys I was watching, philosophizing about whatever, and you know, he said something, took a position, and he's like, man, people are going to edit that, and it's going to come back again and again.
Yep,
and again.
I saw or heard the clip you're talking about.
So again, it relates to our last video a little bit. These videos are out of context.
Yeah.
You know, it's difficult to know the context. So part of our mantra about being authentic is trying to present as much of the context, I suppose, as possible.
So a wee bit of background, what we're talking about is the last episode, which was social media influencers. I was saying to Andy before the cameras started rolling, I felt I was censoring a wee bit, and it was affecting my energy levels, and it was affecting, I felt, how I was able to communicate what I was thinking, and I don't know why I was doing it in that episode. I don't know. It's a weird one. Why that topic would cause me to go, I need to tread carefully.
Well, my guess is you feel really passionate about it. It's really important to you. So all your activity will have amplified in it.
Could be.
Right.
It could
so,
be.
So like you just be like really on it, but it might have gone the other way. You know, people find like when they're stretched that way, they get into the zone. But
yeah, and I felt I didn't. It was weird. It didn't, because when we were talking off camera, once we'd finished, I felt I was much more kind of animated.
Fab stuff that you were saying there. Right. But for my education though.
So what we're talking about in this edition of the Social Experiment podcast?
Well, I was couching it as bounce back. How do you like bounce back, or how do you deal with adversity? And partly why that was in mind, you know, I had a bit of a funk. You know, we'll have off days,
Recently?
off periods, yeah. And I was just thinking, right, what do I know about getting out of a funk? And part of being authentic is appreciating. You know, I teach this stuff. I teach about, you know, personal development, emotional management, things like that. And it becomes quite a personal thing. So, you know, it's like, yeah, what do I know about getting out of this?
Sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question on what you said. Do you feel sometimes because you teach it, so you're the guy up front?
Yeah.
When you have days where you feel that, are you much more aware of feeling it?
Well, it's often my clients or groups might have an expectation that I should be different. But often I'll just try and be authentic, and I'll role model. No, I can't possibly be peak performing and clear thinking and fantastic emotional management all the time. That's just not realistic. The realistic thing is to appreciate wherever you are and to do what you need to do to do well. So I'll role model that.
Have you heard of the Kybalion? It's this ancient, it's an esoteric text, and it's like one of these sort of mysterious texts where nobody really knows how it originated and nobody really knows where it came from. But it's meant to predate the Greeks. It's meant to be sort of part Greek philosophy.
I don't know this. I'll check it out.
It's available as a PDF. It's not the sort of copyrighted thing. You can find it online, download it, and read it. But in the Kybalion, it talks about how everything is on a plane. So basically, I read this years ago, and it kind of changed my mind in a lot of ways. Where basically you can have a moment of euphoria, and you can have a moment of despair, but they're the same thing. It's the same plane. It's the same emotional place that it's coming from, and it's recognising that a moment where you're up here will be counterbalanced by a moment you're down here, because it's the same emotion. So euphoria and despair.
Yeah, I think, for sure, your capacity to really appreciate what's amazing about life, and it's really, so what you're doing, you're measuring, you're evaluating, you're deploying your sensitivities. But if you deploy those same sensitivities and evaluations to things that are more challenging, then you potentially can feel that really richly. You know, and there are a lot of the philosophers I admire, Nietzsche would be one, would be, bring that on, embrace that, because that's part of a rich life. A good life is a rich life, not a kind of whitewash of kind of neutrality. You're going to have these depths of experience. And so far in my life, that seems to fit with my experience.
That's almost a callback to the whole social media influencer lifestyle, where they present this veneer of life where it's always amazing, the sun is always shining, they're always going to have the best experiences, and it can set people up who are influenced by that portrayal to think this is how life always is. Life is always peak, it is always the best day ever, but life isn't. And I think there's that whole, there's loads of shades of greys and blacks in there, where you do have days that are really, really dark and depressing, and they're just as valuable on your journey in life or in business than the days where everything is just, you get out of bed, your hair's perfect and your breakfast is amazing, you have the best day.
Yeah, because if you think about it, if a person was that perfect, then how admirable is that? If they don't have to try hard to look amazing and to carry themselves amazingly, they're not a hero. They're, it's like, I'll give you a quick analogy. It's like when I was a kid, you were either a bit like a Batman fan or a Superman fan. I was always a Batman fan because he had a hard life and created himself. Superman, like, the stories were cool, but not that much to be admired because these powers were there by default. It's not much of a hero if you're indestructible. Whereas Batman was totally fallible, and that's what made him a hero, right?
Yeah.
So if someone was really that infallible, there's nothing much heroic in that. But your ability to take adversity, to learn from it, to bounce back from it, there's something much more heroic in that, surely.
I know in my life, I can identify clearly moments of extreme adversity, and I would never want to go back and take them away.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? Like, most people, when you ask them, would you, like, if you could go back and change that, would you? And it's like, but to do that would be to deny who you now are. You are the sum total of all your experiences, good and bad. If you don't embrace that, it's terrible for you, to deny. And I've got, I've met clients, coaching clients, and also I can think of some folk I know personally that have had real challenges in their life, and if they've not integrated it into who they currently are, it's really bad for them.
Yep.
It's the music plays on. They've not concluded what they needed to conclude. They've not integrated into who they now are. And so, for example, how that shows up practically is, I know folk that their memory's terrible because they can't get into the past, because they've passed off the past. They've like separated it. So who they are now is like they're trying to sustain themselves who they currently are, but only at the expense of all of who they could be. They've disconnected from themselves. So they have some kind of identity shift. It can be partial. So what I'm interested in is experiencing all of life, ups and downs, and that's all part of it. That's all part of the learning.
Yep.
Now, sometimes that's tough. Sometimes it's tough when you're in it. You might say, well, that's easy for you to say, but I've had more than my fair share. Well, maybe not more than my fair share. I've just had a share.
You've had your share, yeah.
I've had my share of challenges. I'm not particularly special that way. I'm saying we all have. But what I'm really interested in is what sense to make of that in my life, and what value is that, and I really believe that there is value.
Yep. I think I'm taking it to the world of business, particularly the world of running your own small business.
Yeah.
We both run our own small business, so we don't go and clock in. We don't have a boss, and we don't have a paycheck arriving like clockwork on the 28th in the month. We want holiday time. Well,
am I not getting paid for this?
No, sorry. We can maybe work that. Maybe we get some sponsors. Maybe we become influencers.
We're doing that, man.
So that world, the world that we're in, and I know there'll be people who'll be listening to us are in exactly the same world. the being able to bounce back from adversity is really, really important if you want it to be a thing that you can sustain. And part of the reason why we're doing this is because I have a video I made. We talked about it in the pilot, where I was sort of at that crossroads: do I bounce back from adversity, or do I cave and go and do something else? How important do you think the mindset of, it's a bump in the road, I'm going to deal with adversity, I'm going to learn from it? How important is that mindset in business?
Oh, it's super important, and it shows up in so many different ways. Like, so for example, and I think we talked about this when we first met. So the advice that you get often when you set up a business is, you have this business plan, and think through all the consequences of your business and whatever. But often the mistake people make is that people think that I have to get the perfect plan, and then I'm going to deploy that plan, and then, by virtue of the perfection of the plan that I have in the first place, my business will be successful. No, we now know that that's not true, and there's more really useful stuff out there about being an entrepreneur, which is, the idea of like a minimum viable product. I'm going to make something that's good enough to test, and I'm going to go out knowing that it will probably fail. I'm not going to try and fail, but I'm going to go out and it will probably fail, but I'm going to learn lots from it. I'm going to learn about what my customers' needs are. I'm going to learn about whether the market can sustain it, and then I use that as feedback, so that I don't have a sense of some kind of idealized business plan. I'm going to have a theory about what the market might like and then go try it. But I think the same thing happens personally. Instead of having like a grand plan, this is why I don't buy into the idea of your life's purpose. I think that's a kind of flawed idea, because find your life's purpose. Well, there's nothing to find. You create it. You create your life's purpose. And I think if you're not sure what it is, you have to go out and try things. So your question, what was your question was, how important is it to learn from?
Yeah, so it's taking times of adversity and learning how to deal with it in order to,
you're going to have adversity, so that's a given. That's going to happen. The only people that don't have adversity are the folk that are 6 foot under, right? So you're going to have it. So the question is, what's your personal approach to responding to it? You can deny it, you can try and learn from it. If you take high performers, and I wouldn't necessarily always look at high performers, but if you look at high performers, whether it's in sport or business, whatever, they're just really good at being uncomfortable, and they're really good at, it's not that they're good at failing, they're going to fail anyway, but it's like they understand how to derive the lessons from it. One pop psychology says there's no failure, only feedback. I quite like the idea.
Yeah, or the winning or learning. John Kavanagh, Conor McGregor's coach, he wrote a book, Win or Learn, no losing.
Yeah, so there's always the potential there to learn. I think call it what it is though. If it's if something failed, it's failed. Doesn't mean that you failed globally. It just means that didn't work the way that you hoped it would work. Yeah. Okay, so how come you had that expectation? Now the other thing is, if something fails, it's like if someone says, I hope this is good advice in business as well. People say, well, that didn't work. I always check, but what did it work to do? It didn't work to deliver the thing you wanted it to work, but what did it work to do? What did it deliver?
I think failure is, if you see failure as being the end, this particular thing I was trying to do in life or in business didn't work, therefore that's the end, then it is a failure. But if you see it as being that particular thing didn't work, why didn't it work? What did I do? Was it something I did? Was I lacking in some way? Was it just not the right time? What can I learn from it? Then it's not actually a failure. It's not. It's just part of the story, part of the journey.
It worked to do something. Yeah. So, and if it teaches you about the reality of whatever you've got, whether it's the reality about your competencies or the reality about the marketplace or whatever, you're just closer to reality now. So now you can use that. Yeah. I've told this story to friends and I've posted about it before, but it's one of my favourite. I'll try and maybe in the link somewhere I'll try and attribute it to where I learned it. But one of my favourite analogies, metaphors, is the story of Like if you have a prized possession, so in the original story it's like a vase or a vase for American viewers. It's like a vase, and you know, prized vase, you put it on your mantelpiece, and you know you look after it. It's a prized possession, and one day you knock it over, and it smashes into a million pieces. What's your response to that? It's like, what sense do you make of it? Now you could try and put it back together. You can try and stick it together and use glue and whatever, but then you always, even if you could make it look something similar to the way it was, you know that it's kind of not quite right. You know, it's not the ideal vase that you thought it was going to be. So one of the best responses is to appreciate you can make something new. So in the original story, you can make a mosaic. Now you would never have planned to make a mosaic, but the reality is, here's what you've got. You've got all these bits now. You can maybe make an incredible, beautiful, novel mosaic, something that would never be conceived about before, because you know life wasn't like that. Now you can create something entirely new.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things I like to add to that story is the beauty that you saw in the vase in the first place. That came from you. There's no beauty in the vase. It's you
Perception, isn't it?
It's your beauty that you brought to it, or your aesthetic, or your sense of beauty you brought to it. Equally, you can put that into the mosaic, you can put that into the bits. So, you know, whether it's a business plan falls apart or whatever it is that you're working on, realizing that there's stuff there you can still use.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do I optimize what I've currently got and make something amazing from it?
Yeah. It's a really good point. What's your thoughts on the there is a strong thing in the West and our culture of avoiding days where you don't feel that great, where you're feeling a little bit down, and people are, you know, I'm going to maybe self-censor a wee bit, but I'm just super aware of it, and I've been super aware of it the last week or so, where people, even people that are fairly young are getting antidepressants, or they're either getting diagnosed or self-diagnosing themselves with anxiety, and it's like they feel they can't cope. Unless everything's going absolutely, in their perception, 100% right, they can't cope and end up at the doctor and getting medication. Is that, do you think that's a problem that's developing, where we maybe just need to recognise, like, go back to World War II, for example, mindset, things are a bit shit at the minute, but they'll get better, this is what the cards we're dealing with? Or are we right as a society to think, including in business, to just go, no, I want everything to be flatlined, I just want everything to feel good all the time?
Yeah, no, so like I was saying before, you are going to experience hardship, you are going to feel bad. That is inevitable, that is a part of life. So once you understand that that's the case, it's not, of course you wouldn't wish it on yourself or other people, although Nietzsche, the philosopher, often talked about that. You know, it's like it's a gift, because that's where a lot of your learning is going to be. You maybe not wish it on yourself or other people, but it is going to happen. So the question is, what do you make of it? So again, like, our interest in social media presents this picture that people are perfect and that they always feel fab, or that these gurus are always upbeat. It's just not the case. You can't possibly sustain that. And even if you could, your life would be just like a kind of flat line.
Yeah.
You're already dead, but you're just animated.
Yeah.
So the question then is, what do you do about it? What's your response? So I recommend, I've written about this, and I've blogged about it in other places, where so first thing is to get real. And the first part of getting real is, if you're feeling off, if you're feeling bad, if you're feeling in a bit of a funk, first thing is to identify that. Now, we'll often identify it superficially and then move on. You know, we'll, I don't feel so good. You know, I'll go for a beer, or I'll put some trashy thing on TV, or I'll, you know, get a feel good hit from somewhere else. That's understandable, but it's not sustainable. You know, understandably can lead into problems. Really useful thing is to identify, well, what's really going on here? Like, instead of superficially noticing it, it's like to check, like, what's really going on here. Okay, so if I say I'm in a funk, or if I'm down, what's that? That's a catch-all label for your experience. What's really going on? Okay, maybe I'm disappointed. Maybe I thought life would happen in a certain way, or I thought that project would work a certain way, Or I thought I would turn up at a meeting and smash it, and I didn't quite do it. Okay. So that's what it is, disappointment. So disappointment, any feeling that you've got often implies there's certain things happening. So disappointment, for example, is you had an expectation it would go a certain way, and you're now noticing the gap. The feeling that you're getting should alert you to the gap, not send you somewhere else. What you need to do is to attend to the gap and go, that's where the lesson is.
Yep.
So if I expected it that way, was there anything reasonable about me expecting it that way? Do I need to change my expectations? Or maybe my expectations are reasonable, but what I need to do is change my performance somehow so I can deliver on my expectation.
Totally agree.
So the feeling is a cue. The feeling is a clue. It's a signal to go to pay attention to something. So the first thing is, notice that you're feeling something. Next thing is, the feeling that you're feeling, what is it? Is it disappointment? Is it frustration? Is it anger? Like I like to point out, there's a difference between, you might say, I'm really annoyed. Well, when you say you're annoyed, what is it? Are you angry or are you frustrated? They're two different emotions. You need to check. Frustration, for example, implies you feel you could have done better. Like I'm frustrated or circumstances could have been better. So it implies some kind of change. Anger works differently. So what's the feeling? What are you really feeling? What does it imply about the way you're operating on the world? And then what additional resources can you bring in, whether it's a perspective or whether it's some skills or other resources that you've actually got that maybe you could have used that you didn't, or that you have to now go learn. And then build some kind of like some kind of plan based on your learning. So go and try and learn something, go practice it. So that, and that's good, so that you're not just moping or indulging in your bad feeling. So I'm not advocating having bad feeling for bad feeling's sake. I'm saying you're going to feel it anyway. The quickest route to your kind of liberation is to identify it, figure out what it's about, and then go do something about it.
I think if we want to get through life and not hit the potholes and not feel negative emotions, and I could maybe put quotation marks around negative, they're just emotions. All emotions are just emotions. But
so emotions themselves are neither good nor bad.
Exactly.
They might feel not so good, but it doesn't mean that the way it's operating is not so good.
So feelings of frustration, feelings of anxiety, feelings of those days where you just feel dark, everything feels dark, it's okay to feel those things because they're typically indicators of something else that's maybe going on in life.
Yeah, and if you deny it or if you distract yourself or you don't figure out what the feeling's about, if we, again, the analogy of a kind of signal's useful here, it's likely to amplify.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to feel even worse. Now, you might feel...
You turn on the trashy TV show and it distracts you for a couple of hours and then you go to bed. You don't wake up feeling any better.
No, you're likely to have a terrible night's sleep. And then in the long term, because you haven't learned the lesson, you're likely to make the same mistake again, and the feeling that you'll get about that will be even worse. Yep. So quickest route is to be really real about your feelings. And, you know, we're all going to have a funk. You know, we were saying off camera, I'm happy to say on camera, you know, this thing about where, you know, we shouldn't feel bad or whatever, and like it's become almost a brand to have like anxiety or whatever. So we need to naturalize this stuff. We'll all feel it to a certain extent, and we need to talk about it much more, I think, as well. So recently it was we should have this would have been a good topic for a few weeks ago, was the Mental Health Week, which I think is a great opportunity.
Definitely. Particularly the way it's affecting men under the age of 40, mental health issues, and then, you know, depression and ultimately suicide. Suicide's the biggest killer of men under 40, I think, in the UK. It's funny just listening to when you're talking about recognising those feelings as being cues or clues. I can think back to last October, being on holiday in Spain with Mary. We'd just got engaged at the start of the holiday, so it was great. So it's like peak. It's peak, isn't it? And I think 2 days in, I was waking up and had this weird this is me being authentic and honest, you know, taking folk behind the scenes of what
I'm
was on
listening.
in my head. Very good, Fraser. But I felt a kind of emotional and mental slump. So obviously, so the first thing, you know, if you've got any sort of emotional awareness, you're thinking, okay, well, that's the slight come down off the peak. Right?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
happens, absolutely happens. But it was sort of lingering, and I quickly identified that it was sort of resonating to do with work, right? To do with work, there's something wasn't right. So I ended up spending like the last sort of day and a half of holiday sort of doing work-related things and sort of get my head into work gear and making notes about work stuff, which is not really what you're meant to do on holiday. It's meant to be you get away from all that, but something was telling me something isn't right, and I really struggled with it for the remainder of 2018. Just this feeling of the way I described it was waiting for the other boot to drop, the other shoe to drop. Just feeling something's not right, something's going to happen, something's not right, and I couldn't put my finger on what it was. But by January, we were away for my birthday in the middle of January, and I just remember sort of waking up on my birthday morning and it being clear in my head. Right, you need to get your shit together with work. You don't have your clients spread right. You're not diversifying enough. And we're on Arran, and the ferry got cancelled, so we had to stay in Arran for another day. So Mary, she went to the spa again and went to the pool. I sat in the room with my iPad and just planned, started writing down. So that was the middle of January. Of course, at the end of January, I lost the big client. So it was almost as if it was like my subconscious was alerting me back in October. So that's why when what happened at the end of January, it was a slight shock, but it wasn't as much a boot in the balls if I hadn't had that unease that had eventually sort of germinated and grown into, right, you need to act now.
Yeah, yeah.
And I had a 2-week buffer between me sort of recognising, right, okay, I need to act, and then the client cutting ties. And I was interviewed on a podcast last week, and I'm sure I mentioned on that, like the next morning after that adversity, that bump in the road, waking up really, really early, but not that anxiety waking up where you wake up and you're like, oh my God, oh, this is terrible. It was waking up with a tangible buzz of excitement. It was that sort of, you know, you get that in your gut. I feel this feels really, really good. And writing down in a journal, sort of doing the line down the middle of the page, pros, cons, and the only con was the loss of revenue, loss of income. Everything else was a positive. Everything else was, right, I'm free to pursue other lines of work. I'm free to learn new skills. Because one of the things that I realised was you can be pigeonholed in business. This is what you're doing. That's kind of it. You're in that ducat. You know, you don't really have a lot of other strings to your bow. So it's been great. It's actually been really, really positive because I'm learning photography. I'm diverse in the type of video that I can produce. I'm not having to manage any social media for anybody anymore, which is great because that's really, really time consuming and it's not much fun. But so I'm able to spend more time learning, developing new skills and pursuing other avenues. So it kind of, that moment of adversity was really, really positive. And I should be in a depression and a slump, and I'm not.
Yeah, I mean, so I think one of the things I've learned, and I'd give a shout out to John McWhirter, one of my kind of trainers and mentors, taught me the most about this, is you want to learn from all life's experiences. You want to learn from the peak experiences, you want to learn from, you know, the real challenges and stuff. You also want to learn a bit from the middle ground. You know, you don't always want to have to wait till like a health crisis before you start learning, or a relationship crisis before you start learning, or a business crisis before you start learning. So I'm dead interested in what are the things that you can do to provoke your learning before it becomes critical. But if things are critical, equally you want to learn from that too. And equally, if things are going fab, fantastic, great opportunity. How do you learn from that as well? As you were talking, I was thinking about and kind of pop psychology, or a lot of the kind of really easy to digest sort of work on like positive mental attitude and stuff. you know, they promote that stuff quite superficially. The idea, you know, just believe hard enough, you know, think positively enough. It's like, well, no, I mean, that can give you a real buzz, it can give you a real kick, but that's not actually going to help you perform more competently. And there's loads of research that shows that imagining something fantastic, and that if that is all that you do, it can actually be counterproductive, because you get a hit from feeling good about a fantasy instead of actually going to work on your life.
Yeah.
So it's actually worse for you, it's bad for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then it has an additional problem where when things don't turn out the way you thought they were going to turn out, is in addition to just feeling as bad as you would have felt, you feel worse because you're contrasting it to this amazing fantasy that you had. So it's not so good for you. The other thing that I was thinking of is kind of an old Stoic idea of they were quite practiced at scenario planning. Basically, you imagine, okay, if I did lose my client, you know, how would I feel about that?
Yeah.
So you could get some of the feeling. The idea is not to indulge in bad feelings for the sake of it.
Yeah.
But maybe what I'll do is I'll just scenario plan for this. Okay, if some of the worst happened, and I get enough of the feeling to make it seem real for me,
Mm-hmm.
then what would I do? Really useful exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not being scared of the potential outcome of something like that happens. It's analysing how would that make me feel. Right, okay, can I deal with that? And again, it goes back to the whole thing of life isn't just this lovely, smooth, long runway. It's pitted. It's got ups and downs. There's peaks and troughs and valleys and all the other cliches. And it's being prepared for each one so that when something out of the blue happens in business or in life, it doesn't knock you for six. I mean, and it is okay to be knocked off guard a wee bit, but it's recognising I can get back on guard. It's not the end of the world if something negative happens.
Yeah, for sure. And if you were really comfortable your whole life, the chances are that's not possible either. But even if it was possible, you wouldn't be learning.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you'd be so far in your comfort zone, you're not really experiencing the real world.
Yeah.
So you're getting out
Just
there.
a quick question. What's your thoughts on the idea that there's no such thing as a bad experience, there's just experiences?
Well, bad as an evaluation that comes from you. There's only experiences in the world, but for it to be bad, that's about the way that you relate to the world.
So somebody that's listening or watching who is maybe having what they're calling a bad experience right now in business, for example, is it maybe just a case of peeling off that bad label and just viewing it as an experience? Changing the filter?
Yeah. Well, you use just there.
Okay.
And it's like just, the word just often hides a multitude of
of course.
well, if I could just cure the world of global warming, then it's like, but how do you actually do it? No, I mean, often we'll use words like, "Oh, that was a bad experience," and if it's just your turn of phrase, I think that's okay. But I think there is a real benefit to an interesting thing to try is to say, okay, well, this happened, and then there's my response to it.
Yeah. Because the only thing you can control is your response.
Yeah, well, you have. Well, I was thinking about this when we were talking about influencers. You know, we can influence. I'm not even sure we can control ourselves. We can influence ourselves in the same way that we can influence the world. You can have an influence in the world. You can have an influence on yourself. Ultimately, you can't control the world, and you can't control yourself. So what I'm interested in is, well, how does that influence work?
Yeah.
So if you have a bad experience, what happened? And just being real with that. And how much of it is in what happened, and how much of it am I adding to it by the way I'm thinking about it? Or also, am I having it linger when it doesn't need to linger? Or, you know, if it's going to be that, you know, if it really was bad, you know, because of course shit happens, bad things really do happen to people. So if a thing happens and it's really bad by any kind of normal standards, if if something was really bad. It was bad enough that it was bad.
Mm.
You don't have, like, it would be such a terrible shame if you added to it or if you denied it or if you, but it's like, okay, so the bad thing happened as bad as it was, so what can you learn from it, or
Yeah.
what or how can you maybe share a lesson with other people? Sometimes that takes a little bit of time.
So you
I
sometimes
think
need
it's-
a bit of distance between what's happened and
Yeah,
then your sort of mindset on it later on.
Yeah, I think it was Andy Warhol said, time heals, but you actually have to do something with your time. So it's not enough to, I'll just wait long enough, I'll feel better about this.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in actually taking a minute's thought and thinking, okay, so what's a really useful way to think about this?
Yeah.
And
And I think as well, in life and in business, we're kind of talking about two ostensibly separate things, but when you're self-employed, business and life are really, really close together.
Yeah, for sure.
That degree of honesty where you can just be really, and we talked about this right back at the start, it's if things aren't going great, it's okay to be honest about it. You don't need to present a facade that, oh, my business is absolutely fantastic. If your business is maybe struggling and you're struggling, it's sometimes being honest about that. And again, this is my experience. People come out of the woodwork and they're like, oh yeah, I've felt the same way. I've had the same thing happen to me. So then you don't feel as if it's just you that's felt this, or it's only happened to you.
Yeah, when you share that, you make it legitimate for other people to feel however they
And it
feel.
dissipates the power of disappointment, the power of maybe being stuck in a rut. It suddenly kind of goes away. And it's a weird thing happens where you sort of metaphorically get pulled out of the rut, or I don't know. It's a really, really interesting thing. If you're honest about it, you're prepared to share how you're feeling. It takes the power out of a quote unquote negative experience in business, and I think the same applies in life as well. Right, so that was a kind of heavier one, wasn't it? But it was good because we spoke about the emotion of being in business, things maybe not always going right, how we deal with it mentally. I really like your point though about the clues. I'm going to remember that. When we're feeling a certain way, don't just ignore it. Analyse why. What are the clues? What's it trying to tell us?
What's the feeling really about? It's a really good place to start, I think. We can be really clever at confusing ourselves around that sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's why it's useful to speak to somebody else. If someone says, is it really about that? Or is it this other thing? Oh, maybe it is this other thing.
Yeah.
Other
Okay.
people can help you be honest.
Right. We'll wrap up.
Yeah, super.
socialexperimentpodcast@gmail.com is if you want to email us directly. SocialX, that's EX podcast on Twitter. But wherever you see this, it could be in Andy's LinkedIn, it could be my LinkedIn, you might see something on Instagram or YouTube, wherever it is. You get anything you want to feed back to us, just
Tips
comment
on
and
bouncing
email it.
back.
Yeah.
Things that you've been challenged with, you'd love some quick advice. Hey man, we'll throw some advice for what it's
And
worth.
any stories as well where you thought you've hit a wall with business, where you feel, oh, this is it, that can't get any worse, but then a couple of years later you're looking back in that and going, you know what, that's the best thing that could ever happen. We want to hear those stories also.
Yeah,
They're
and
pretty cool.
I suppose authenticity has been a theme for the last few episodes that we've done, but maybe from their vantage point, when they see us, they might think, it'd be dead interesting to hear Mark and Andy talk about a particular topic.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear about that as well. Maybe we can kick it around.
Cool. Thanks for watching and listening, folks.
Thank you.